Ulrich Rölfing's portrait of Abraham Humberg depicts him as a distinguished gentleman, proud of both his family and businesses. Abraham lived until the age of 80. Perhaps his death in 1932, the year before Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, was a timely blessing, as he never had to bear witness to the Holocaust.
Abraham Humberg war der stolze Patriarch der Humberg-Familie, der Vater von Johanna, Leopold, Helene, Sigmund, Frieda, Ernst und Wilhelm. Er war ein Kaufmann, Metzger und Viehhändler und wurde beschrieben als klein und untersetzt, ein stattlicher Mann von kräftiger Statur. Abraham stand im Haus der Familie an der Fleischtheke der Metzgerei.
It is clear that despite being the only Jewish family in town, the Humbergs were well liked and very much accepted as a part of the community. They were remembered for their generous gifts at weddings and communions and included in all events and celebrations. We saw them as Dington townspeople and not as Jews. Zalia was beloved as the Humber matriarch, the heart and soul of the family. While Abraham ran the butcher shop in the family home, Rosalia ran the textile shop directly across the hall. Rosalia was known for his kind and generous nature, always willing to help those in need. Rosalia was a dear, amiable woman. She wore her hair with a chignon tied to the front of her head. Rosalia was so well loved by all that when she died in 1937, neighbors risked by the Nazis to attend her funeral.
Johanna war die einzige unverheiratete Tochter von all den Humberg-Kindern. Sie hat wohl oft ihren Bruder Leo von Wesel aus besucht. Dort wohnte sie und ging von Haus zu Haus, um Kurzwaren zu verkaufen. Johanna war nicht so beliebt wie die anderen Mitglieder der Humberg-Familie. Dies mag mit ihrer Schwerhörigkeit zusammengehangen haben, die sie im täglichen Umgang mit ihren Mitmenschen behinderte. Johanna hatte Leo in der Pogromnacht besucht. Sie musste mit ansehen, wie die Einrichtung ihres Elternhauses zerstört und auf die Straße geworfen wurde. 1941 wurde Johanna nach Riga deportiert, wo sie im Alter von 58 starb. Das Porträt zeigt sie stark und robust, eine alleinstehende jüdische Frau mit einer Hörbeeinträchtigung, die versucht, den Terror im von den Nazis regierten Deutschland zu überleben.
Wilhelm Humberg. Wilhelm was the youngest child of the Humberg family and was said to be on occasion stubborn. He was popular in the community and a successful cattle dealer. Willem married a Dutch woman named Rosetta Menko. They settled in Borken, where they had 2 children, Margot and Vera. Increasing incidents with the Nazis prompted their move to Winterdwyck, Rosetta's hometown in the Netherlands, where their 3rd child, Jacob, was born. Sadly, the family didn't escape far enough, and in 1940, Germany invaded the Netherlands. Then, Willem's worst fears came true. After hiding in a rural location for many months, his family was rounded up for the transit camp Westerbork in 1943. 4 weeks later, they arrived at Auschwitz. Leaving the cattle cart and stepping onto the selection ramp at the death camp, would be Willem's last moment with his family. Rosetta, Margot, age 14, Vera, age 10, and Jacob, age 8, were all immediately sent to the gas chambers and murdered. Willem would be sent to the main camp where a number was tattooed on his arm. 7 months later, he perished at the Warsaw concentration camps. It is that moment on the selection ramp of Auschwitz, forcefully separated from his entire family, his 3 children torn away from him, that one cannot imagine. The senseless destruction of this entire family is one of the saddest chapters in the Humberg family history.
Siegfried. Siegfried war das älteste Kind von Helene Humberg und Abraham Frank. Seine jüngere Schwester Edith war aus Deutschland mit dem Kindertransport nach England entkommen. Siegfried jedoch weigerte sich, seine Eltern zurückzulassen. Siegfried war gezwungen, in die Niederlande zu fliehen, um der Verhaftung durch die Nazis zu entkommen. Kurze Zeit später kam er für 5 Jahre in das Durchgangslager Westerbork. In Westerbork erlebte Siegfried trotz der Umstände einen kurzen Moment des Glücks. Er fand eine Frau und heiratete. Von Westerbork kam er nach Auschwitz. Dort starb er im Alter von nur 32 Jahren. Das Gemälde zeigt einen zuversichtlichen, glücklichen jungen Mann, der in seinem Heimatort im Verein sportlich und kulturell aktiv war, bevor die Nationalsozialisten an die Macht kamen. Noch weiß er nicht, welches Leid ihm noch bevorstehen sollte. Die Hochzeit in Westerbork. Im Durchgangslager Westerbork heiratete Siegfried 1942 eine Frau namens Margot Kohn. Margot war im Lager zusammen mit ihrer Tochter Sophia interniert. Es ist unglaublich, dass unter den trostlosesten Umständen Liebe aufblühen und ein Neuanfang entstehen konnten. Siegfried und Margot konnten Trost und Glück beieinander finden, nachdem sie von ihren Familien weggerissen worden waren. Doch die junge Familie wurde nach Theresienstadt deportiert. Siegfried kam von dort nach Auschwitz. Das Hochzeitsbild zeigt Braut und Bräutigam voller Stolz. Trotz ihrer gelben Davidsterne war es ihnen für einen kurzen Augenblick möglich, in ihrer besten Kleidung mit einem Strauß gepflückter Wildblumen in den Armen ihre Liebe zu feiern. Es ist ein Moment des Triumphes von Gut über Böse, von Leben über Tod.
Margot Humberg. Inevitably, the one family member whose photo instantly brings tears to my eyes is Margot, that beautiful little girl with a sweet face and large white bow in the center of her grandparents' golden wedding anniversary photo. Clearly, the light and joy of all the adults surrounding her. Margot was the eldest child of Willem Humberg and his wife Rosetta. Margot had her life tragically cut short at the age of 14. To think of that innocent girl as a teenager, walking the train tracks at Auschwitz to meet her horrific fate in the gas chambers, is beyond heartbreaking. Margot's senseless murder puts a name and face to the mass genocide of the Holocaust. Of the 999 people on their transport to Auschwitz on September 2nd, 1943, 498 people, including 160 children, were selected for the gas chambers, including Margot, her 2 siblings, and her mother. When we visited Humberg House in 2012, I told my mother that I needed to see Auschwitz on that trip. It was very important to me to see firsthand the concentration camp where members of my mother's family had perished. When we visited the rural hiding place of Margot and her family in the Netherlands, I had taken some stones from the ground. And when my mother and I were at Auschwitz, we placed those stones by the stump of a tree near the gas chambers and said the mourner's Kaddish, a Jewish prayer that honors the dead. Through documents, photos, and artifacts, we were able to learn more about Margot Humberg. Margot had a best friend named Kobe, whom she wrote her final letter to from her rural hiding place in 1943. Kobe held on to that letter from her dear childhood friend, whom she had never forgotten for the rest of her life, and donated it to the Humberg House Museum. This letter gave a glimpse into Margot and her family's final days, and is poignantly written with a wisdom far beyond her 13 years. And now we sit here. When we freeze to death, we freeze to death. But it's really no fun to be here alone. Now let's count on God's help. Then we will be fine. Just a few days later, the family was found. On the back of the envelope is written moved to Westerbork, just recently taken away by the police. Margot would only live a few more weeks. My mother and I met Kobe at the Humberg House opening in 2012, which was a very emotional experience. Kobe had never forgotten her childhood best friend, murdered only for being Jewish. Kobe had poignantly pinned her grandfather's gold brooch onto my dress, insisting that I have her family heirloom that today sits in a special place in my bookcase. I think it was that I was a living link to her lost friend, whom she was devastated to lose at such an early age. Ulrich Rölfing's portrait of a 13-year-old Margot shows a girl with a haunting gaze and sadness in her eyes, only a few short months before walking to her death in Auschwitz. It is impossible to look at an image of Margot without feeling a profound sorrow. My father, Ernst Humberg, was a hard-working, quiet person who went about his daily activities and got along very well with neighbors. He tried to make life for me on a farm in Quebec, Canada, as comfortable as possible. Observing the Jewish customs and religion, he would go into town for Rosh Hashanah, brackets Jewish New Year, services, and would bring matzah, brackets flatbread, for Passover back from Montreal, where he sold cows at the market. Growing up, my father never talked about Germany, and I knew nothing about his siblings or what had happened to them. I also had no knowledge of his first marriage to my mother's sister, who had died in childbirth. Through the Humberg House research, I learned that Nazis came for my father on Kristallnacht, November 10th, 1938, exactly 1 week before I was born. They kicked my heavily pregnant mother in the stomach as my father escaped out the back bedroom window. He rode his bicycle 35 kilometers to his brother's home in the Netherlands, where he was eventually reunited with my mother and I before leaving for Canada. Losing his first wife and child must have weighed heavily on my father, and he then had to escape, leaving my highly pregnant mother, not knowing whether he would ever see her again. I can understand why he never talked about Germany. They came to Canada to start a new life, which wasn't easy. Growing up in Quebec, I rode an old black bicycle to town and around the village. It had been brought to Canada by the Terhoff family. I even continued to use the bicycle once I moved to Winnipeg. I never thought much about it, but one day I found a bicycle bell in my garage that had Brünnen und Wesel stamped on it. The Humberg House researchers knew immediately that this was the very bicycle that my father had ridden on his Kristallnacht escape. It was crated up and shipped to the Humberg House Museum. When visiting Germany for the museum opening in 2012, we met the man whose father had hid my father in his barn when he was fleeing the Nazis, effectively saving his life. He even showed us bullet holes in the barn wall. That gave me the chills. It was on this trip that I learned how many non-Jewish friends and neighbors had helped my parents escape. It is to their kindness that we owe our lives. I consider myself to be a miracle child. After my father escaped to the Netherlands,
My mother gave birth to me just 1 week after Kristallnacht on November 17th, 1938. It is amazing that she was able to give birth to me in a hospital at that time as a Jewish woman. There must have been tremendous pressure for my mother. At the time, she didn't know if my father was alive at all. If it wasn't for the kindness of neighbors, she wouldn't have been able to reach Holland and reunite with him. My father probably took that photograph in the Netherlands. Soon after, we boarded a ship to Canada. I was so little that I had to sleep in the bathtub. I considered it a miracle that she was able to escape Germany with me as a tiny infant across the border to Holland. Nobody knows how she got there. Many people must have helped her.